What's up? This is Monday, fifth period, and we're going to talk about our assignments, show some examples, and the plans upcoming. So on Friday, I sent this email to a bunch of people with like, hey, if you're behind on the project, here's the video, here's the links, here's some stuff to get caught up. And I did get things turned in on Friday or the weekend. Just now, during the last period, I put some comments on those. So if you guys had turned in something, I commented on it and sent it back. That was usually calling for some changes, but it wasn't like, throw out the whole thing and start over. I was just saying, oh, yeah, why don't you add this? And why don't you think about this in order to, A, make your thing work better, or B, make your thing unique? Because I don't want people to just copy the examples. It's fine to do that as a starting point, but then you want to add stuff and change it around. So I will give individual suggestions on those. But often what I've been saying is, hey, look back at your idea from the very beginning when I said, like, do a sketch of a 2D game that we could go with. A lot of people had cool stuff, and I'm saying, hey, look back at that and try to recapture the magic of what you thought before we started. Anyway, next time I'm going to do a live video, trying to keep our routine, live videos every Wednesday and Thursday, and I will introduce the big final thing, the CQA, with rubric and all of that. But it's not new, it's just continuing what we've done. It's going to be, I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, a reflection, I guess, but it's half reflection looking back and half looking forward. It's going to say, okay, you've got your game and you've taken your Pong and turned it into something else. Okay, we don't want it to be Pong anymore. It's going to be changed enough that you can call it something else. And what have you learned? What works? What doesn't? What do you need to focus on? How does it work when you test? If you hit run a bunch of times and see what happens, what goes wrong, what are the weird bugs you got to fix? And then the other half of it is going to be saying, like, well, what's the plan? If you were going to sell this to investors and say, hey, you got to give me some money so I can beef it up and do a full version with graphics and improved, maybe multiple levels, all that stuff. What's the plan? Because that's what we're going to do next quarter. We're going to beef it up, make images, background, colors, all of that, and then multiple levels or multiple modes or something like that. So if you're doing Space Invaders, maybe once you kill all the enemies, there's a boss that comes out and you have a slightly different version. Or if you're doing a platformer, maybe you get through a door and now there's another stage that has another challenge. Something like that. So I'll post that next time with a live video and go over it. But today I wanted to go back to something that I said I would do, which is I got this example of Space Invaders type game. So we've done Breakout because that was kind of a natural progression from Pong, just like it was when the guys made it in 1979 or whatever. And we showed examples of that, and some people made their own version of Breakout with different colors and features and things, and they're looking good. And then I've done some examples with a platformer, and some people have made their own versions of that with like different items or a moving platform or a hole that you can fall into, things like that. But I had this other example that we never finished, so I said I would come back to it. We've got this Space Invaders type game, and I've let me move the webcam. So what we had when we left off was you can move your guy on the bottom, which is just the same as Breakout. We'll change the shape, and next quarter we'll add a design to make it look like a ship, maybe. And you can hit spacebar to shoot your bullet, and it goes across the screen and just moves straight. That's easy enough. But when you hit one of the enemies, it's supposed to disappear, and they disappear as well. What I said was I was going to add 2 lists. So currently the enemies are in a list, and whenever the bullet is moving, it checks, am I touching any of the things in the list? If so, okay, they're dead. We're dead. Moving on. And I was going to say we have a second list, which is like the bench in basketball or the backstage in a play where something's on screen and it goes off. But it's not gone. It can come back, just like an actor can come back from the backstage, or a player can come off the bench, and then they're back in the game. So that's very useful in Space Invaders. If you kill some of the enemies and you want new enemies, you shouldn't be creating new ones. You should just reuse the ones from before and pop them into a new spot, that kind of thing. However, I was messing around with it and it just did not work. I don't know what I was doing. In fact, it even got worse, where like now when I shoot a bullet, it goes through. It's supposed to hit one and disappear, but it goes through. So something I did made things worse. And I'm looking at videos from this guy, John Philip Jones, who I've recommended before, and I'm trying to see what the deal is with Python lists. If you take one element out, the other ones shift and they change their numbers, but it's not the way I think it is. Who knows? I'll come back to that, but for now, let's do it another way, because there are, of course, always a million ways to achieve the thing you want to achieve. What I want is to have a list of enemies, and when one of them dies, it gets removed, but it's still ready to come back. Like maybe 2 seconds later, or maybe 2 minutes later, but it's just ready. If you need another one, it's ready. Just like in Tetris, there's always another piece ready to come out, you know? Now, we can do that without lists. We could, for example, just move them to coordinates that are off screen. I could move it to like -1000x, -1000y, you know? And then it's still doing the same thing. It's just not displayed because it's not in the visible screen, and it's not bumping into anybody else because it's way off to the side. That's a little bit silly, but it could work. The other thing we could do, another alternative that might come to mind, is just make a variable on each of the objects that says on screen true or false, you know? And then if it's like this enemy on screen equals true, then we draw it, we check for collision, we do all the stuff. If for this guy on screen equals false, then we don't. We just bypass it and wait for the future. I'm going to try that one in this example and see how it goes. Because when you're thinking of your imagined version, whenever you're working on something and you imagine what would it be like with one change, you should know that there are always multiple ways to get there. If one function or one statement is not working, maybe you can fix it. Like this thing with the lists, it could be that I have the wrong mental model of how they work, like I'm imagining the wrong thing, or it could be that I just put a typo in one line and it's one character away from working. Either way, let's just do it go down another path, okay? So this one, it might be too far down that path. I'm going to go to previous version, open it up, see what happens, you know? I have one called version 1.0, and that's not good. I should have named it with more informative titles, you know? But we've got what we've got. So, hey, it was already running. I must have left it that way a while ago. So now we got this where, okay, it does the thing I want it to do, which is that you hit spacebar, the bullet moves, and if it hits the enemy, then they both disappear, the bullet and the enemy. And you could move through that space. Okay, this is mostly just the same code as break. Oh, look at that. they knocked a hole in the border on top. So that's one thing we got to check out. Anyway, what I wanted to do was to make the enemies have a tracking variable that says on screen or not. Okay, this is going to make it where they don't get removed from the list. So it's a different setup than what we've had. What I had before was you go through the list every frame to see if you're hitting any of them. And if you do, they're done. They're off, whatever. The problem with that is it's hard to get them back. You know, if you have another list you put them in and you say, okay, I'm going to check through those, then okay. But if you just have them loose floating around, then how are you going to grab them? You know, you don't want your ball to have to like check their names, because then it would have to know all their names, and you don't want that. The name shouldn't matter, right? We want to name them once and then think, who cares? Doesn't even need to be typed. Okay, if they're in a list, you never need to know their names, because you can just say, hey, go through the whole list. And we want something like that. So in our code right here, they're called brick. I didn't even change the names yet, right? Let's do the name change. Do you guys know the find and replace thing? If you hit Control F, and Control F is search, like if you're in any web page or any Google Doc or something, you can search. But there's also one called find and replace. So I'm going to say brick is going to turn into enemy, and I'm going to make it case sensitive, because it does matter in this case. There's a class and there's uses of the word that aren't in a class. So let's hit replace all. What the heck? And then I'm going to do brick with a capital is going to turn into enemy with a capital. Hey, look at that. Then I'm going to hit run to make sure it works, because the find and replace is very good, but there's a chance it missed something. Nope, it's wonderful. Okay, let me hit that back border again and see if it knocks a hole in the top like it did. Yeah, it did. So we got to work on that, but I think it would be one line, nothing bad. Okay, so we've got enemy list. That sounds like something Joseph McCarthy would have, or something like enemy list. It sounds kind of suspicious. So I have a function to remove them from the list if they get hit. And we're going to change that to keep them in the list, but give a variable that is tracking whether they're on screen or not. So I had one called cracked, because when we were doing the breakout, I thought, oh, maybe you crack them and then they go away after another hit. And some people have done a version of that in theirs where they have like a health number, an HP, but let's say on screen equals false. It's going to start as true, but it's going to change. So I don't want it right here, because this is for the stuff that doesn't change. I'm going to put it in the initialization, because that sets it once, but it doesn't lock it in. It's given me a green underline because that is the fine syntax. There's nothing wrong with this, but it says, hey, you never used that thing. So right here, instead of removing it from the list, I'm just going to say self.onScreen equals false, which means we're doing the same result. We're making the same stuff happen, except you're going to keep it in the list, and when you go through the list, you're going to say, hey, is this on screen? Okay, then we're going to do our thing. Is it not? Then we're not. This is kind of a big change, even though we're only doing a couple lines, but we can use all the stuff we have. So that's fine. That's done. We got to change the thing up here to say when you're checking whether you're going to display this guy, whether you're going to check the collision and stuff. Instead of saying, are you in the list, you're going to say, are you on screen? So update for the bullet. Okay, so a minute ago I was doing the enemy. Enemy list. Okay. So I'm making this up as I go, by the way. This is not a planned scripted thing. So for object and enemy list, if you collide, sure. Object dot die. That actually doesn't change because we changed the stuff inside the object die function. That's good. And if that's actually kind of perfect already. We just got to make sure that right now if we run it, they wouldn't actually it might be great. No, okay, see it's hitting that empty space where the brick was because it's removed from the on-screen setting, but it's still checking the list of its own. So where do we want to get that? We could do it in a lot of different places. I would say we could do it right here. I don't really like that. We could say, okay, so sometimes you just kind of got to track like where the code goes in terms of like, okay, it triggers this, which asks for this, which needs this, which goes back to this. And so you might do a little bouncing around of thinking, okay, where does this Rube Goldberg machine take its steps? So let's see what would happen if we hit spacebar and shoot. Okay, we hit spacebar, we shoot, ball.launch will go here, and then it'll say if you're in the list, you don't need to do anything. If you're not in the list, you're going to get added, and then we might change that to go with the on-screen and off thing. It might work that way, or it might just be parallel to do them both the same way, even if it doesn't help, because somebody looking through the code would be flummoxed by going, why did they make this one work like this? Why did they make this other one work in another way that is equally fine? But, you know, it'd be like using pounds in one paragraph and then kilograms in the next, you know. So maybe you're gonna start moving, and when you start moving, you're gonna check collision. So if you're in the list, we can just say and if you collide and on screen. This is not beautiful. It's not oh, I guess we can just take this. No, we have to do both. We can try that. Oh no. Let's make a function to answer the question. If somebody says, hey, are you on screen? It's going to return this variable. to say yes or no. Now we can use that. That's also better in terms of our object-oriented programming approach, where this is not reaching into the variables of the object. This is asking the object nicely, hey, are you on screen? Thanks. Let's try now. No, it's not liking it. Why does it not like it? Oh, because I didn't type self. That's it. Sometimes you have a very dumb, obvious problem, and it's not anything theoretical. It's just, hey, you forgot to type. Now we got an interesting problem, which is that it moved through. Why did it move through? Because it starts out with true, and so this shouldn't stop it from the collision thing, right? Oh, yeah, it does. What the heck is wrong with me? Okay. Just more typo stuff. Hey, look at that. Now it should go through that space that used to have a brick in it. It does. Okay. So this works exactly the same as it did a minute ago. This is one of those things where it's like sometimes you dig a hole and then get yourself out of it. But now we're in a better position knowing that if we want to move our guys on screen and off, we can do it just by changing the variable instead of taking them from one list to another, getting them back to the original list. When I tried that at first, it wasn't working. I'm sure I could get it working with another day of like figuring out how lists do all their tracking and what's going on behind the scenes. But you've always got multiple approaches. So we are set up now. When you ask, is it on screen? It returns. When you die, you set it to false. And then we can make a function called respawn. And the respawn would say on screen equals true, start in a location, get moving again. That's good. Now, let's make our guys a little smaller because the bricks are supposed to be big, but the enemies in Space Invaders are supposed to be like, squarish. So where do we have this? Width, let's make it 50 by 50 just to be nice and square. Oh, now they're overlapping. Okay, fine, 40 40. Okay, great. So now we got to fix that issue on the back, especially because it won't let me shoot again because the bullet is still out there. What's going on with that? Let's make a function. Again, you could build this into whatever nonsense, but let's build function. Let's just call it check off screen. If self.y is less than border minus then self.die get out of here. It's saying self is undefined. That's probably because it's just taking a minute. It's actually loading and it's going to realize that it's fine. Sometimes that happens. So now I got to add check off screen to the update function. I should probably call it like check out of bounds or something like that, but that's okay. Wait, what? Why is it not liking this? What? This is normal. Whenever you type in new stuff, you're always like, yeah, I got it, it's fine, confident, I'm gonna type it, it's gonna work. And then you have some dumb issue. I'm actually gonna hit run and see, because I just don't believe it. Oh, that's why, because I forgot to type self right here, because you have to send it. So it's like when you make an object, the reason you have to type self in the parameters of each one of these guys, even though it sounds kind of weird, is that you have to tell it like which one. So it's like the ball class is for all balls, but you want this one to check, is this particular ball off screen? Like, we don't want to check, is the concept of balls off screen or something like that. We want to check, hey, this one. How do you know which one? You put self. How are you able to get the self variables and functions? Well, you've sent it to it. You've sent that as an argument, just the same way you would send like some user input in the parameters. It totally makes sense when you think about it, but when you're typing, you forget, and then you're like, what the heck? So, okay. Now it should, boop, it goes away. It takes like a tiny chunk out of the wall because it moves 1 pixel too far or something. But now all of this is working. I can't shoot multiple bullets, so we got to set that up, but that will be very easy to do. And what we need to do next is, how about make the enemies move a little bit, you know, just back and forth, left and right, in order to get their actions started. Enemies and Space Invaders move left and right. Sometimes they move up and down. Sometimes they're like, in my memory at least, they often move in like circular way, you know, like it's not straight diagonal, but it's like, oh, they're going around and kind of curling nicely. The way that spaceships really move, I guess we don't have a good real life sense of the physics the way we do if you see like a car or something, but whatever. This video is super long, but my guys are going to lunch soon, so I might as well keep running until the bell kicks us off. Let's see, how can we make the enemies move just in a tiny first step kind of way? You'll want to add in a collision check so they don't bump against each other or bump against the wall. And then you'll want to say like, oh, just go left for a while and then go right for a while, nothing crazy. We're not going to have them be like intelligently following the player, at least not at first. We're just going to have them kind of, shift around. So I'm going to make a function. I'm going to delete this one because we're not going to use it. Let's call it strafe, because they're moving left and right. Later we'll do the forward and backward thing. So what's it going to involve? It's going to involve, oh, interesting. Okay, so what's it going to do? It's going to involve going left, self.x equals, or negative equals 1 until it hits a certain point. Then it's going to turn around and go self.x plus equals 1, and then it hits a certain point, they just go back and forth. So how could we track that? How could we say it's going to go left for a while and then turn around? It could be until it hits something, obviously, but even if it doesn't, we want it to turn around eventually. It could be keeping a record of its initial x, and then just saying, like, if you stray too far from the initial, then you turn around and go back. Or it could be saying a certain distance from the edge of the screen. It could be like, well, if you hit the edge of the screen, turn around no matter what. No matter how long it took you to get here, if it was one move or 100 frames. Let's say we could have like a little timer variable as well. That's just like countdown. You're gonna go here until you count down from 20, and then you're gonna go over here until you count down from whatever. That would be tied to the frame rate though, and it might mess up if we change that delay in the main loop or something like that. So let's see what we can do here. We can make a Vx in the initialization and say -1. And then say, we don't have to move it right here, but we say like if self.x equals border, meaning if it's moved enough to hit the edge, then it's going to turn around. Equal. Then self.vx equals 1. So this is going to say it's going to move over. When it hits the edge, it turns around. And then we got to make another one on the other end that says if it goes enough this way, it's going to turn around. So if self.x equal, I don't know, let's just say the right edge, which I know that's not enough because they're still going to bump into each other and have other problems, but at least this will keep them in that zone. I don't know if it goes too far this way. If it goes too far this way, equals width minus border, then self.vx equals -1. That should be a colon. Then we have to do the movement. So like some of our objects have a move function that says, hey, whatever your velocity is, apply it. You know, right now we have velocity, but the computer doesn't know what velocity means until we tell it, hey, self.x plus equals self.vx. So now that happens. And then we have to tell it to actually run this function because this currently is not doing anything. So this one, we're not doing an update, but we should. So let's make that happen. Def.strafe or self. Okay. Let's try this. It's going to be absolutely insane because they'll overlap each other and stuff, but let's see if it can run with no errors. Oh, we didn't tell it to actually do that. So alright, let's try that. No, they're not liking it. Why don't they like it? Why don't they like it? Let's cut out this part. Hey, the bell's ringing. We're out of here.